What happens when directors known for thrillers, dramas and comedies step into the realm of horror? Hi guys, my name is Sarah and welcome to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies old and new. Horror has a long history of celebrated directors whose names are synonymous with the genre's most iconic and influential films. Masters of the genre such as Wes Craven, John Carpenter, George A. Romero, James Wan, Mario Bava and Tobe Hooper are not only remembered for their legendary films, but also for how they have shaped the horror genre. But sometimes it's the directors who ventured into horror only briefly who have made some of the genre's most impactful films. This list explores 10 directors who only made 1 or 2 memorable horror films but ended up leaving a huge mark on the genre. Jaws follows the story of a great white shark that begins terrorizing the shores of Amity Island, attacking multiple people. When the town's mayor downplays the threat to prevent scaring off 4th of July tourists, Chief of Police Martin Brody teams up with marine biologist Matt Hooper and seasoned fisherman Quint to track and kill the shark. While there is some debate as to whether or not Jaws is actually a horror movie, for me there is no doubt of its horror status. Jaws is a horror movie that blends creature feature with suspense and adventure. It's a story of survival, fear, and humanity's inability to control nature. And through its 3 leads, it is also a study of class dynamics, with each representing working class, middle class, and upper class respectively. And while its portrayal of sharks was ultimately inaccurate and perhaps even irresponsible, its horror movie status is evident in it causing a new fear in hundreds of people who were now terrified to go in the water. It's difficult to believe that Jaws was only Steven Spielberg's second feature-length film. Sure, the film went well over budget and production time, but at 26, Spielberg already had his distinct directing style. Jaws focused on suspense, atmosphere, and the unseen threat of the shark, things that became the film's defining strengths. Spielberg's talent for pacing and tension building can be perfectly seen in the film's minimalist use of the shark. This was mostly due to technical restraints and led to a reliance on POV shots and John Williams' score, allowing audiences to feel fear without actually showing the shark. Steven Spielberg is one of Hollywood's most celebrated directors. There can't be many people who haven't heard his name. He is renowned for films across multiple genres, such as E.T., Indiana Jones, Schindler's List, Hook, Jurassic Park, and Saving Private Ryan. While primarily known for family adventure films, Spielberg doesn't stick to a particular genre. Instead, his pattern is to tell stories of wonder that always have humanity and moral conflict at the heart of them. While Jaws is so far Spielberg's only venture into horror, the film left a lasting mark on the genre and the film industry as a whole. Jaws is considered the first summer blockbuster and completely revolutionized Hollywood's approach to marketing and film release. It showed that horror could be released for a wide audience and influenced almost every creature feature to be released in its wake. Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead is a fast-paced modern remake of George A. Romero's 1978 classic. The film follows a group of survivors of a zombie outbreak who barricade themselves in a mall. As the undead descend on the mall, tensions rise between the group and what was once their sanctuary now becomes a trap. The remake moves away from Romero's original social satire, focusing more on survival horror, raw scares and gore. Written by James Gunn, it has been described by the writer as a story about redemption at its core. While Zack Snyder is a well-known director in other genres, Dawn of the Dead was his first full feature film, but his distinct visual style is apparent even in Dawn of the Dead. With Romero's classic considered one of the greatest zombie movies made, comparisons would be inevitable. So Snyder and the producers saw this as a reimagining rather than a remake. Snyder wanted Dawn to be grounded in reality and a straight horror movie. Snyder's signature octane action and quick cuts are added to stylized gore and fast-moving, aggressive zombies to create a sense of chaos and terror. Since Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder has gained a reputation as the comic book guy or the superhero guy. His filmography is filled with visually striking films such as 300 and Watchmen, and superhero movies such as Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman, and Justice League. His career has largely focused on action and comic book adaptations, but he did return to the world of zombies for 2021's Army of the Dead. Along with Resident Evil, Shaun of the Dead, and 28 Days Later, Dawn of the Dead was one of the handful of films that was released in the early 2000s that ignited the revival of the zombie subgenre. While zombie films could be accused of becoming oversaturated in later years, Snyder's fast-moving zombies, like those seen in 28 Days Later, changed how the Walking Dead were portrayed, influencing the depiction of zombies in media. Carrie, based on Stephen King's debut novel, tells the story of a shy high school girl who faces relentless bullying at school and abuse at home from her fanatically religious mother. As Carrie discovers her telekinetic powers, her emotional turmoil begins to mirror and amplify her abilities, and when a cruel prank at the prom pushes her past breaking point, Carrie unleashes her powers with devastating consequences. De Palma's adaptation of King's classic is a portrayal of adolescence, sexuality, and cycles of abuse. De Palma is well known for his stylized visuals, his use of suspense, and trickery with camera angles. Carrie's prom night scene, with De Palma turning an everyday setting into an arena of blood and mayhem, and acting as a culmination of Carrie's emotional state, make it one of the most memorable scenes in horror. Outside of Carrie, Brian De Palma is mostly known for thrillers like Dressed to Kill, The Black Dahlia, and Mission Impossible, and crime films such as Scarface, The Untouchables, and Carlito's Way. While most of De Palma's films have the signature use of suspense and psychological tension, Carrie remains a unique entry in his filmography, with it remaining the only film to have supernatural elements. Carrie remains one of the defining films about high school alienation and adolescence, and is one of the standout horrors of the 1970s. The Silence of the Lambs follows FBI trainee Clarice Starling as she seeks the help of imprisoned cannibal Dr. Hannibal Lecter to catch another serial killer, Buffalo Bill. The film delves into psychological horror as Clarice's encounters with Lecter become chilling games of manipulation and psychological warfare. The Silence of the Lambs is a horror film that stands out for its performances, its profoundly unsettling atmosphere, and because it pushed the horror genre into mainstream recognition, winning 5 Academy Awards, including Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Demme's directing style in Silence of the Lambs is one that is intimate. Using close-ups and placing the camera directly in front of the actors, he created an unnerving sense of closeness and connection for the audience to the characters. While the film is filled with psychological complexities, it is the characters that are the main focus, with Lecter and Clarice both being complex and interesting focal points. Outside of his one step into horror, Jonathan Demme is mostly known for making dramas such as Philadelphia and Rachel is Getting Married, and music documentaries. But it is Silence of the Lambs that has had the most impact on the film industry, with its blending of genres and, once again, as with Jaws, proving horror movies could be successful as a mainstream release. It could also be said that Silence of the Lambs helped establish a model for character-focused thrillers. The Haunting follows a group of people who come together to investigate the paranormal disturbances within Hill House, an old mansion with a dark history. As Eleanor, a fragile and lonely woman, becomes increasingly entangled in the events, the lines between the supernatural and psychological blur. Wise's film is a study of repression, the supernatural, and the power of suggestion. Robert Wise's directing style for The Haunting is one of atmosphere over shocks. It's the perfect example of restraint, using suggestion to evoke fear without explicitly showing the ghosts or any violence. Wise's clever use of wide-angle lenses and distorted angles can give the impression to the audience of Hill House being a living, malevolent presence in itself. Robert Wise is perhaps one of the directors on this list that has spanned the most multiple genres, from musicals such as The Sound of Music and West Side Story, sci-fi films like Star Trek the Motion Picture and The Day the Earth Stood Still, to war films such as The Sand Pebble starring Steve McQueen. Wise's reputation as a director is largely built on his versatility. The Haunting set a standard for haunted house films and remains influential still, with Wise treading ground between the supernatural and insanity, leaving viewers unsure as to whether what they were seeing was real or just in Eleanor's mind, helped pave the way for later films to explore mental fragility and the idea of perception. The Haunting is often considered one of the best haunted house films ever made. Alien 3 takes place on a desolate prison planet called Fiorina 161, where Ellen Ripley finds herself the sole survivor after her escape pod crash lands on the surface. After it is revealed that the crash was caused by a facehugger attack, Ripley is forced to confront her old enemy once again alongside the hardened prisoners and guards of Fiorina 161. Fincher's approach delivered a far darker and nihilistic tone, leaning into themes of hopelessness, survival, and sacrifice. David Fincher is well known for his gritty, atmospheric visuals and psychological intensity, all of which are evident in Alien 3, setting it apart as the bleakest entry in the Alien franchise. Alien 3 was actually Fincher's feature debut, and despite production troubles and constraints from the studio, he managed to create a film with a palpable sense of dread and emotional heart. His use of light, shadow, and framing help enhance the prison setting, making it a claustrophobic and terrifying setting. David Fincher, while never returning to horror, is well known for his remarkable entries in the thriller genre, including Seven, Fight Club, Gone Girl, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and Zodiac. Most of his films are notable for their attention to detail, their moody atmospheres, and disturbing themes. While Fincher was limited in Alien 3 in terms of being able to delve into his character's psyche, as he likes to do in his later films, his fascination with human vulnerability and strength is still evident even in his first film. Though Alien 3, in spite of its production difficulties, is a solid entry in the Alien franchise and may even be argued as having the most interesting portrayal of Ellen Ripley, it struggled on release and still remains a divisive film among horror fans. Near Dark is a film that blends horror with western, following a young man named Caleb who, after a chance encounter with a mysterious drifter named May, is reluctantly pulled into a roaming gang of nomadic vampires. Set against a stark rural American landscape, the film emphasizes the grittiness and brutality of vampires, avoiding traditional folklore and instead showing them as violent outsiders. In Near Dark, Kathryn Bigelow has a strong emphasis on atmosphere combined with a stylized use of lighting and shadow, which gives the film a dark and haunting quality to it. Bigelow's ability to place her characters into violent environments and use of visceral sequences is something that we would see again in some of her later films, such as Point Break and The Hurt Locker. Kathryn Bigelow has often been commended for her ability and willingness to approach what are often labelled as male-dominated genres, such as action and military, with films such as Point Break, K-19 The Widowmaker, and The Hurt Locker. Near Dark has become a bit of a cult classic over the years since its release, and like Dawn of the Dead did with zombies, Near Dark helped establish a new portrayal of the vampire in media. An American Werewolf in London follows two American friends, David and Jack, backpacking across the English countryside when they're attacked by a mysterious creature. Jack is killed, but David survives, only to find himself plagued by haunting visions and the gradual realization that he is transforming into something else. American Werewolf is a horror film that balances the moments of horror and violence with moments of romance and comedy. John Landis, mostly known for his work in comedy films, brought his comedic sensibilities to American Werewolf, mixing the moments of body horror and scares with dark comedy. While he achieved both successfully, this was quite unconventional for the time. Landis's films often tend to be character-driven stories wrapped up in the absurd, and American Werewolf is no different. While set in the supernatural, David's journey through grief for his friend and his own transformation are portrayed in a grounded and relatable yet tongue-in-cheek way. While there are memorable visuals in some of Landis's other films, such as the singing bush in Three Amigos and the car chase scene in The Blues Brothers, American Werewolf contains one of his greatest visuals and displays of practical effects during the werewolf transformation scene. Using groundbreaking effects, he created an unforgettable moment in horror. John Landis isn't exactly known for being a horror director, but he's also not exactly a stranger to it, as he also directed the music video for Michael Jackson's Thriller and helmed the tragic and doomed Twilight Zone movie. But outside of these, Landis is mostly known for his work in the comedy genre, with films such as Three Amigos, Coming to America, Animal House, Trading Places, and of course one of my all-time favourite films, The Blues Brothers. An American Werewolf in London was groundbreaking and ended up influencing comedy, werewolf and horror comedy films for many years to come, and the film's legendary transformation scene raised the bar in terms of showcasing practical effects. 28 Days Later follows Jim, a bicycle courier who awakens from a coma to find London abandoned and in ruins, overtaken by violent infected after a contagious virus has turned people into zombies. 28 Days Later redefined the zombie genre by introducing fast and ferocious creatures instead of the classic shuffling zombies of the past. With its gritty digital cinematography and a focus on survival and human nature, 28 Days Later uses horror to explore social breakdown, fear, and resilience in a world that's been torn apart by a deadly plague. Danny Boyle is known for his fast-paced, visually dynamic style and for his gritty and earthy atmospheres. In 28 Days Later, Boyle uses a raw, guerrilla-style cinematography that gives the film a realistic, almost documentary feel to it. And his signature pacing, use of close-ups and bleak, empty British landscape helped to convey the character's situation, terror and isolation. Danny Boyle already had multiple movies under his belt before 28 Days Later, including Trainspotting and The Beach. He would then later go on to make films such as 127 Hours, Sunshine and Slumdog Millionaire. While a versatile director spanning multiple genres, his style is certainly unique, and with most of his films exploring the theme of human endurance and societal issues. 28 Days Later, along with others of the 2000s, reinvigorated the zombie genre, introducing the rage virus and helping to ignite the trend of fast-moving and ferocious zombies that would be seen in later movies and later video games. But beyond its contribution to the genre, 28 Days Later is another film that perfectly uses its narrative for social commentary. The Shining, based on Stephen King's novel of the same name, tells the story of Jack Torrance, a struggling writer who takes a job as the winter caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel, where he moves with his wife Wendy and young son Danny. Soon, supernatural forces in the hotel begin to twist Jack's mind, pushing him towards violence. Kubrick's adaptation of the novel delves into themes of madness, isolation, and the supernatural, and created a film that is often considered a cornerstone of horror. Stanley Kubrick is known for his unorthodox approach to directing, his meticulous attention to detail, and drive for perfection, and The Shining is no different, often known equally for the toxic film set as much as the film itself. Kubrick's slow pacing, symmetrical compositions, and tracking shots help create a sense of unease and entrapment inside the Overlook walls. Kubrick's characteristic exploration of the human psyche and his somewhat unconventional approach to horror make The Shining a standout and memorable film. Stanley Kubrick is another versatile director on this list, with films spanning multiple genres such as A Clockwork Orange, Lolita, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Full Metal Jacket. He is known for his deep thematic exploration of humanity and his often interpretive narratives, and while The Shining is his only foray into horror, the film still reflects his artistic hallmarks: precise visuals, psychological intensity, and philosophical depth. The Shining is often and widely regarded as one of the greatest horror films ever made. Kubrick's portrayal of descent into madness, coupled with the isolated setting of the Overlook Hotel, almost became a blueprint for atmospheric horror, influencing countless films after its release. Even technical elements such as the camera fixed on Jack as he hacks at the door has been duplicated in so many films. The imagery of the film entered pop culture and became iconic, with Here's Johnny often quoted and the image of the Grady twins becoming one of the most recognisable images in film. So there you have 10 horror films that were directed by non-horror directors. As always, let me know your thoughts down below. It was interesting to me that most of the films included on this list could be or are classed as horror classics and staples of the genre. These may be directors who merely dipped into the genre, but they certainly left a permanent mark on it. If you're new here, then please do give the episode a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any other content. And if you would like extra content on top of everything that you get here on this channel and would like another way to support this channel, then there is a link to my Patreon page in the description box below. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode.